Hello and welcome back to another Nerf Blaster review video for the channel. My name is Luke Triton and today we are covering the Deploy CS-6. There is a reason why I'm reviewing an older blaster, and this is something that might take a minute to explain. So when I first started doing Nerf videos for the channel, I wanted to review blasters, but more so I had interest in older blasters. And this is something I've made known in the past, where I live in the UK and not every Nerf release comes to the UK, especially within the last number of years. So if you were getting into the Nerf hobby today, you would have to go onto eBay and kind of get some second-hand older blasters, which do still kind of hold up, but not all of them do. The Deploy was known as one of the worst Nerf blasters ever made. It's not too bad, but there were some performance issues, and when it comes to firing darts, the darts got really crummy because of how this front system works, and that is something I'll explain later in this video. But just to quickly make it known, this is no longer the worst blaster. The Elite 2.0 Warden has now taken that medal, and it is not a good medal to want to win. So this is a 2010 release. This is a very funky blaster because it can do this. Quick sound warning, by the way. Look at that. It deploys. So this is a pump-action, magazine-fed blaster in the original N-Strike line, and it has some tactical potential. It has a barrel attachment point and one tactical rail along the top, which is a bit pointless because you would put scopes and other optics along here, but inside the carry handle is an actively usable sight, which is not too bad, to be honest, because it's very closed off, kind of like a scope, and it's, again, visually quite nice. I would like to try and cut off the handle to make it its own sort of carry handle scope attachment one day, but I don't know if I want to do that just yet. I mean, I do want to try and keep this blaster intact for as long as possible. So again, this is pump action. The prime is just as standard as you would find on any modern blaster. It's no weaker or stronger to any kind of elite blaster, so to say. Firing is, if I actually grab the trigger, very weak because, again, this is from the original N-Strike days. I'm not going to do any kind of chronograph results with this because this is a very weak blaster. It was advertised, I believe, to hit around 30 feet, and about 30 or so FPS is the sort of fire damage that this thing can do. So again, performance-wise, it's not the best, but it's more so of a collector's piece. And that's actually a good segue into this next point, because this video on the Deploy is a video I've wanted to make for the longest time. The reason why I'm only doing one now is because, again, having limited offerings in the UK, some second-hand prices are much higher than they should be. I have seen so many eBay listings for the Deploy, but they're about £15, £20, and honestly, that's never going to be worth it for this kind of blaster, because it does have such a poor performance. I'm never going to fire a dart through this, ever, because that's not the point of me wanting to have this blaster. It's just a collection piece. But again, second-hand prices in the UK are way more than they should be, and that's why this particular video has been put off for so long. So what's going on with the magazine then? So it is magazine fed, and this is the magazine feeding system itself. On the other side, we do have an access door, which is, if I actually prime it back first. So to be able to access it, obviously you prime back and then you can open it. It is a sprung prime door, which is kind of interesting. You don't have to manually close it, but having to keep your finger in there to hold it up is also part of the effort that is just a bit unnecessary. Clearing out jams with this was quite difficult. I can definitely remember seeing some crummy darts, and this didn't necessarily help. Not all the time, it did actually prove useful, but there were loads of occasions where this sort of, again, this overall mechanism that's going on here just interfered, and that was a real shame. So to fire that off again, we can carry on, and this was also the main reason why it performed really badly. So I'm going to move this back up to the top position there, and it's not going to be too easy to see, but as you can kind of see in there, it's the same system as it is for any other magazine fed blaster. You've got the tubes, you've got the mechanism, especially with the pump handle with how it feeds new darts. But because this rotates, it can lead to many jams. There are occasions where you put a magazine in, and because of all the rotation that's going on, sometimes darts don't feed properly, and there are occasions, it's a bit difficult to describe, but you would definitely understand it when it happens, where the tube doesn't surround the dart fully. It actually catches the edge of the dart and kind of accordion style squishes it, and that's what happened so often with the Deploy. And it's for that reason why this gimmick is something that you've never really seen again. Well, we have seen it in the form of the Mega Bulldog, I believe it's called. But the feeding system for the darts itself remained untouched, especially because that's a kind of front loader. This is a magazine-fed blaster, and this is something that you would never want to modify ever. However, there is something else going on for this magazine feeding port, and it is the front light. Sadly, on this unit, the light is broken, and that is because when I went to put fresh batteries into the torch area, it was completely rotten and minging. I cleaned it out to the best of my abilities, but even then, sadly, it still doesn't work. So this is supposed to be a red light, similar to how the Recon's attachable light is kind of shone in a red light as well. And this is also part of where this is the all-in-one sort of blaster, where it has a torch, it has a scope, it has a carry handle as well. You don't necessarily need any more attachments. Obviously, you can add more if you want to. But this feels like a pretty good blaster, visually at least. But the overall quality doesn't scream Nerf. This was definitely more so a Busby design that got stolen into the Nerf category. So yeah, overall, this is a very interesting blaster, but the execution definitely shows its age. This was coming out at the same time as the Long Strike. I definitely remember those old commercials where these two blasters were coming out at the same time, and the Deploy was definitely the lesser interesting of the two. But even then, it had so much going on for it. More magazine-fed blasters, wonderful. It was pump action, so you had a bit more of a shotgun feel to it. Again, the fact that it has a carry handle, it can deploy, it has a built-in torch. It was so much fun. But the overall firing performance is what let this blaster down. So normally at this point I would give a buy recommendation, and honestly there is no need for one. If you're going to get a Deploy, if you don't have one already, then chances are you want one just for your collection, because it is still one of the worst Nerf blasters ever made. And that's the only thing that this blaster has going for it. It's still relevant in conversations where people say, you know, what's the worst blaster that the Nerf company's ever made? The Deploy always comes up in conversations. The Warden, give it a few more years, will probably take that medal, but the Deploy is only relevant because it's just so bad. Me having bought another one of these recently because I sold off my original one many years ago. This is something I wanted back in my collection just for the sake of having a collector's piece. And if you want to Deploy, that's the only reason why I can recommend one. Just get one super cheap. Even if it's broken, that doesn't necessarily matter. That way, it's a bit more authentic, I suppose. But it's just a way of saying, I now have one of the worst Nerf blasters ever made, and it is something to kind of look after and treasure. There are people who have made performance upgrades to this to actually make it functionable. But at the same time, it's not something that is worth doing. You can definitely sacrifice those parts for something else. Again, I would love to be able to cut off the carry handle and make that its own scope carry handle attachment. Very intrigued to do that one day. And the Deploy even has some other good parts when it comes to modifications. This back unit here is one big empty shell. You can take this off and use this as shell integration parts for other blasters, and I have seen what people can do, and that rear bit itself is really cool. So honestly, that's everything I can say about the Deploy CS-6, a good old blaster that is only relevant because it's still stupidly awful. Thank you all ever so much for watching. Be sure to keep an eye on the community tab for polls and updates. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next episode. Bye bye.